Chapter 69 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by George Fairchild. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 69. Not to be put up with. The coat of arms, devised for me by the Royal Heralds, was of great size and rich colors, and full of bright imaginings. They did me the honor to consult me first, and to take no notice of my advice. For I begged that there might be a good-sized cow on it, so as to stamp our pats of butter before they went to market. Also a horse on the other side, and a flock snowed up at the bottom. But the gentlemen would not hear of this, and to find something more appropriate, they inquired strictly into the annals of our family. I told them, of course, all about King Alfred, upon which they settled that 1/4 should be 3 cakes on a bar, with a lion regardant, done upon a field of gold. Also I told them that very likely there had been a rid in the battle fought, not very far from Plover's Barrows, by the Earl of Devon against the Danes, when Hubba their chief was killed, and the sacred standard taken. As some of the Danes are said to be buried, even upon land of ours, and we call their graves, as such they be, even to this day, barrows, the heralds quite agreed with me that a rid might have been there, or thereabouts, and if he was there, he was almost certain to have done his best, being in sight of hearth and home, and it was plain that he must have had good legs to be at the same time both there and in Athelney. And good legs are an argument for good arms, and supposing a man of this sort to have done his utmost, as the manner of the rids is, it was next to certain that he himself must have captured the standard. Moreover, the name of our farm was pure proof, a plover being a wild bird, just the same as a raven is. Upon this chain of reasoning, and without any weak misgivings, they charged my growing escutcheon with a black raven on a ground of red. And the next thing which I mentioned, possessing absolute certainty, to wit, that a pig with 2 heads had been born upon our farm, not more than 200 years agone, although he died within a week. My 3rd quarter was made at once by a 2-headed boar with noble tusks, sable upon silver. All this was very fierce and fine, and so I pressed for a peaceful corner in the lower dexter, and obtained a wheat sheaf set upright, gold upon a field of green. Here I was inclined to pause and admire the effect, for even de Wishelhals could not show a bearing so magnificent. But the herald said that it looked a mere signboard without a good motto under it, and the motto must have my name in it. They offered me first rid non ridendus, but I said, for God's sake, gentlemen, let me forget my Latin. Then they proposed rid readeth riddles, but I begged them not to set down such a lie, for no rid ever had made or made out such a thing as a riddle, since Exmoor itself began. Thirdly, they gave me rid never be ridden, and fearing to make any further objections, I let them inscribe it in bronze upon blue. The heralds thought that the king would pay for this noble achievement, but his majesty, although graciously pleased with their ingenuity, declined in the most decided manner to pay a farthing towards it. And as I had now no money left, the heralds became as blue as azure, and as red as gules, until her majesty the queen came forward very kindly, and said that if his majesty gave me a coat of arms, I was not to pay for it. Therefore she herself did so quite handsomely, and felt goodwill towards me in consequence. Now being in a hurry, so far at least as it is in my nature to hurry, to get to the end of this narrative, is it likely that I would have dwelled so long upon my coat of arms but for some good reason? And this good reason is that Lorna took the greatest pride in it, and thought, or at any rate said, that it quite threw into the shade and eclipsed all her own ancient glories. And half in fun and half in earnest, she called me Sir John so continually that at last I was almost angry with her, until her eyes were bedewed with tears, and then I was angry with myself. Beginning to be short of money, and growing anxious about the farm, longing also to show myself and my noble escutcheon to mother, I took advantage of Lady Lorna's interest with the Queen, to obtain my acquittance and full discharge from even nominal custody. It had been intended to keep me in waiting until the return of Lord Jeffreys from that awful circuit of shambles, through which his name is still used by mothers to frighten their children into bed. And right glad was I, for even London shrank with horror at the news, to escape a man so bloodthirsty, savage, and even to his friends, among whom I was reckoned, malignant. Earl Brander was greatly pleased with me, not only for having saved his life, but for saving that which he valued more, the wealth laid by for Lord Allen. And he introduced me to many great people, who quite kindly encouraged me, and promised to help me in every way when they heard how the king had spoken. As for the furrier, he could never have enough of my society, and this worthy man, praying my commendation, demanded of me one thing only, to speak of him as I found him. As I had found him many a Sunday furbishing up old furs for new, with a glaze to conceal the moss ravages, I begged him to reconsider the point, and not to demand such accuracy. He said, well, all trades had tricks, especially the trick of business, and I must take him, if I were his true friend, according to his own description. This I was glad enough to do, because it saved so much trouble, and I had no money to spend with him. But still he requested the use of my name, and I begged him to do the best with it, as I never had kept a banker. And the John Ridd cuffs, and the Sir John mantles, and the Holly staff capes he put into his window, as the winter was coming on, and sold, for everybody was burning with gossip about me, must have made this good man's fortune, since the excess of price over value is the true test of success in life. To come away from all this stuff, which grieves a man in London, when the brisk air of the autumn cleared its way to Ludgate Hill, and clever prentices ran out and sniffed at it, and fed upon it, having little else to eat, and when the horses from the country were a goodly sight to see, with the rasp of winter bristles rising through and among the soft summer coat, and when the new straw began to come in, golden with the harvest gloss, and smelling most divinely at those strange livery stables, where the nags are put quite tail to tail, and when all the London folk themselves are asking about white frost from recollections of childhood. Then, I say, such a yearning seized me for Moray Crag, and for Dewy Blade, and even the grunting of our sheep, when the sun goes down, that nothing but the new wisps of Samson could have held me in London town. Lorna was moved with equal longing towards the country and country ways, and she spoke quite as much of the glistening dew as she did of the smell of our oven. And here let me mention, although the two are quite distinct and different, that both the dew and the bread of Exmoor may be sought, whether high or low, but never found elsewhere. The dew is so crisp and pure and pearly, and in such abundance, and the bread is so sweet, so kind and homely, you can eat a loaf and then another. Now while I was walking daily in and out great crowds of men, few of whom had any freedom from the cares of money, and many of whom were even morbid with a worse pest called politics, I could not be quit of thinking how we jostle one another. God has made the earth quite large, with a spread of land large enough for all to live on, without fighting. Also a mighty spread of water, laying hands on sand and cliff with a solemn voice in storm time, and in the gentle weather moving men to thoughts of equity. This as well is full of food, being 2/3 of the world, and reserved for devouring knowledge, by the time the sons of men have fed away the dry land. Yet before the land itself has acknowledged touch of man, upon 1 in 100 acres, and before 1 mile in 10,000 of the exhaustless ocean has ever felt the plunge of hook, or combing of the haul nets, lo, we crawl in flocks together upon the hot ground that stings us, even as the black grubs crowd upon the harried nettle. Surely we are too much given to follow the tracks of each other. However, for a moralist, I never set up, and never shall, while common sense abides with me. Such a man must be very wretched in this pure dearth of morality, like a fisherman where no fish be, and most of us have enough to do to attend to our own morals. Enough that I resolved to go, and as Lorna could not come with me, it was even worse than stopping. Nearly everybody vowed that I was a great fool indeed, to neglect so rudely, which was the proper word, they said, the pushing of my fortunes. But I answered that to push was rude, and I left it to people who had no room, and thought that my fortune must be heavy, if it would not move without pushing. Lorna cried when I came away, which gave me great satisfaction, and she sent a whole trunkful of things for Mother and Annie, and even Lizzie. And she seemed to think, though she said it not, that I made my own occasion for going, and might have stayed on till winter. Whereas I knew well that my mother would think, and every one on the farm the same, that here I had been in London lagging and taking my pleasure, and looking at shops upon pretence of king's business, and leaving the harvest to reap itself, not to mention the spending of money, while all the time there was nothing whatever except my